Welcome everyone to Hire Movement Mastermind, or for those in the DC area, happy rainy Friday morning. A little drizzly out there. So my name is Shira Lotzar. Happy to be your host today. We have Vern Schellinger, Wendy Thompson, and Rick Webb with us. Vern is a networking expert. Wendy Thompson is a colleague of Corliss Jackson, and they both do federal government resumes. And Rick Webb is a government contracting recruiter. So because we continue to have a little bit of a small crowd, I know it'll get a little bigger as we go along, but I wanted to keep this, again, just an open forum for your Q&A. So feel free to raise your mic and ask a question. Feel free to put it in the chat if you prefer. And we are here to support you. Who's got a question to start with? Bonnie.
Okay, sorry, I had to. Yeah, so I had a question. So I'm a finalist. I was a finalist for 3 places. One, I didn't make it to the last round. The other one, it was weird. They did a 20-minute interview. It was at 9 o'clock at night. And they called like the weekend before Monday to schedule the interviews. So mine was at 9. And then the next day they called all my references. So my next interview is Monday evening. How weird is that?
Well, first of all, that sounds like this is is it a search committee?
Yes.
And it sounds like they're not using a recruiter.
No, this one
Right.
Isn't.
Yeah, I could tell. Yeah. So they're,
Yeah, right.
Right. Actually, it's funny. Just yesterday, I was talking to a client who's gone through the same thing. She was interviewed on like Wednesday, and then they, called her back for a Friday second level, like boom, 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 boom. These search committees don't really know what they're doing. And so they're just kind of moving through it. And so for them, it's not unusual. If a recruiter was involved, it would have been, because the recruiter would have like stepped them through and prepped people and, done all this stuff. So, I think it's kind of par for the course when a search committee doesn't quite understand, because remember, the search committee is not HR. They don't understand process.
I know, but I shouldn't be worried.
No, if anything, I mean, they're moving very quickly with you. That's a good sign. Yeah. Yes. So Jamie, you have a little a little tip to share in your in your journey. You want to open your mic?
Oh, sure. Thank you. So a couple of weeks ago, I got really good advice from this meeting. I was a finalist in one search, but really more interested in a different position, which was a little more in its infancy. I had just met with the hiring manager that week. So I got some advice in this meeting to reach out to my top choice and let them know that I was a finalist and just see where I was in their minds. The result was that they got back to me immediately and thanked me for letting them know and asked me what the timeline was when I thought that I might receive an offer. I told them likely by Monday that I would get an offer if I was going to get one. They said stand by, and then at 3:30 that afternoon I got a call from HR asking if I was available on Monday afternoon for a set of interviews, and they fast-tracked 4 interviews for me for that Monday afternoon. Spoiler alert, didn't get the offer at the other job. And then all of a sudden I wasn't hearing from them at all. So I'd had these 4 interviews. They went very well. At least my perception was that they went very well. Did all my follow-ups right after. And then, almost 2 weeks go by and nothing. So Shira encouraged me last Friday to reach out again and see where they were. And so I did that, and they wrote back again very quickly to let me know that they're still going through the process and that they're still very interested in my candidacy and will be in touch as soon as they have an update. And they also asked me to keep them updated on my search. So there's still no word this week. I'm continuing to progress through interviews with other organizations. And so far I don't have a need to go back to them yet, but I feel so good about the advice that I got here from this group and from Shira. and in not being afraid to reach out at the right moments. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And what was your, just so, because I know other people go through this, what was your initial hesitancy?
In reaching out?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I always feel like if the only reason I'm reaching out is, okay, so my initial hesitancy on reaching out when I was a finalist, is that what the question is?
Yeah.
Or at all? Okay, so the initial, when I was a finalist, the initial hesitancy was I had just met with the hiring manager on Wednesday. Then I had my final interview with the other search on Thursday. And then, I honestly wasn't expecting to love the position as much as I did after the before the conversation with the hiring manager, but we just connected just on so many levels. And I just really fell in love with the position all the more. And I didn't want to pressure the process, right? I didn't want them to feel like I was tying their hands together. And I actually wrote that in my note to the recruiter. I said, I'm really not trying to pressure the process here. I just want to learn a little bit more about your timeline, and also, if I'm even still being considered after that meeting on Wednesday. So that was the initial hesitancy. And then with regard to the follow-up, I was hesitant to reach back because I don't want to reach back unless I have something really to ask. I don't want to reach out just because I'm having anxiety.
Right.
So Shira, you had sort of given me the guidance last week that it had been enough time.
Right.
That it wasn't nudgy, I think was the exact words that you used. And so I definitely, my heart skipped a beat when I saw the email come back. I was afraid to read it. It was one of those moments where I was like asking my husband to read the note for me. But it was good news. And so now I don't feel quite so anxious that I haven't heard from them this week, because I also have to keep in mind that they fast-tracked 4 interviews for me and they just stacked them all in a row. And it was a brutal afternoon for me. But they did that because they were interested.
Yeah, exactly. And so there is a balancing act, of course. You don't want to be nudgy, obviously. At the same time, it's okay after enough time has passed. So, if you can get from them at the end of the interview, whatever last stage you're in, where you can say, okay, so what's your timing? What's your expected timeline? Whatever they say, add at least a week to it, at least. Everything takes 4 times longer than you think it will, than they think it will. People think, they'll say, in a couple of weeks. Well, that time flies by. It just does. Plus, there's all kinds of stuff that happens. Other candidates come in the mix. People have different opinions about things. It's just Wild West, right? And I know, Vern and I both, and Rick, right? Wendy, I'm not sure how much you deal with employers, but we've seen this, on the back end of how much, how much just gyrations go on, behind the scenes that no one's expecting, frankly. So I think it's okay after, at least a week after when they say to call back, you can do that, especially if you have an update on your end, especially if you're pending with something else and, you think it might close up. The employer wants to know, because you don't know if you are their first choice, they want to grab you. They will oftentimes, just like with Jamie, they will oftentimes expedite things, at least to kind of get things, going. Now, of course, Jamie, we don't know what happened behind the scenes, since then. We don't know whatever, right? But we do know they're interested in you. That much we do know. You don't know your competition, but at least, right, you're a solid citizen as far as they're concerned. So again, it is a balancing act, but don't be afraid to reach out. Worst thing that'll happen, they'll just won't write back. Okay. But you can at least try. Rick or Vern, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, the other thing I would add is behind the scenes, just some examples. Again, I was VP of HR for a number of organizations involved in recruiting, and simply trying to schedule interviews sometimes when there's a hiring manager and a team and so forth and so on, and you get the interview scheduled and then they call you back and say, well, we got to change it. And what do you mean you got to change it? We got candidates. We're going to lose good candidates. Hurry up. We got to get this going. but things come up, as Shira said, and the schedule changes, and now we got to push the interview, which was scheduled for this week to next week, and then other things happen in organizations. There's whatever the crisis of the day is, and that takes precedent over the interviewing process.
Yep.
So again, you just don't know what's happening behind the scenes. Unless, like I said, I was a job seeker, but I was also, a VP of HR. So I kind of understand what can happen and why it takes so darn long as you're going through this process.
It's urgent for them, but it's not necessarily, it's urgent for you, but it's not necessarily urgent for them.
Yes, that's right.
And
Urgent and important to you. And it's important to them, but not urgent.
Necessarily, unless you're their top choice and they
Right.
think you're going to lose you.
Yes.
Then all of a sudden, all bets are off.
Right. Yeah.
And recruiters may have they're working more than one job. So and those jobs are prioritized. So they may put something off on the back burner because, there's this client facing position that has to get filled. So there's a bunch of reasons. Also, in the contracting world, we have contracts that are ending, so we're also looking internally at people that might fit. There's clearance issues. If it's a clearance and someone has an interim, we talked about this last week, but if someone has an interim clearance and it's going to take 6 to 8 months, there's a lot of factors that create different time frames for different positions.
Yeah.
So there is a lot going on in the background.
Yeah. So recruiters have got, if it's a corporate recruiter, they've got lots of job openings. If it's an HR person, they don't have a recruiter. They got every part of HR going on. Stuff happens. Employee relations, like all kinds of stuff. So.
But I would rather have someone email me and just say, look, I'd rather know what's going on with you also, so I can it helps me prioritize.
Exactly. That's right. That's right.
Right on.
So Liliana asked if this applies to local government positions. I believe it applies to everybody. Wendy, I know you guys deal with federal, but would you suggest that this is anything different on your end?
No, I'd say it's the same. The only difference is that with federal and not probably with local government, but your point of contact is not really the hiring person or the interviewer or anything like that. So that's the only person you have to follow up with to see where they are in the process. But you still can do that. But yeah, as far as so many factors going into their timetable, it's the same. And more with government, it's funding and budget and bureaucratic channels and all of that. So many factors that you have to be patient for.
Yeah, it can take a lot longer with the government, right?
It can. It definitely can. And there's no, there's no standard at all. It's all over the map. It can, a month to several months. So. Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other questions? Dawn.
Good morning. I have a question about working with recruiting firms. During my search, I've had some firms that have been responsive and I've had some back and forth with them. But then there are a few firms I've worked with that I've never heard back from them. I've applied to multiple jobs that's offered through the firm. And not even a thanks, but no thanks from them. Right. And I'm just curious, should I continue to apply to these unresponsive firms? Is it me? And they're just not seeing that I'm qualified, or should I and just focus on the firms who are responding to me and ignore the firms that are just unresponsive over the last couple of months? I guess I'm just not sure how to read an unresponsive recruiting firm when I've applied multiple times for multiple jobs with them.
Right. So I would say much more the latter than the former in that it's really about, like with every recruiter, whether it's a third-party recruiter or an internal recruiter, it's all about your fit for the job. Let me just start with that, okay? If you're qualified, as far as they're concerned, not as far as you're concerned, as far as they're concerned, then there's no reason why they wouldn't contact you, right? Because that's their job, is to go find qualified people. Now, the fact that they've been unresponsive, that's a more of, if you will, a customer service kind of a thing. And frankly, if the employer is, excuse me, if the recruiter is what's called a contingency firm, meaning they're not paid until the placement, that means that they are working volumes of searches. Okay. And unfortunately, that often means that their responsiveness is not that great with candidates because they're just all over the place. A retained firm tends to be much more responsive, much more sort of handholdy, if you will. And so it's you know, it's not necessarily you, right? It could be your fit, right, with the role, but at the same time, you know, it has to do with kind of their model, retained, contingent. Besides which, it's not even about the firm, it's about the recruiter. Okay, so every recruiter is different in their own personal responsiveness. I happen to be one of those really uber responsive recruiters. Okay, but this is just me. You know, you can't speak for all recruiters. Everybody's different, just like with corporate recruiters, different personalities, different styles, different business models, different everything. So in terms of whether you should continue to follow up, look, if you feel like you are truly qualified, you know, you've looked down the qualification list and really checked all those boxes, continue to apply, right? Because you never know. There could be that one time where they're like, yes, we believe that you're the right fit. And
I would say the other thing is don't be afraid to ask, you know, if they do get in touch with you, you know, is this a contingency? Are you a contingency recruiting firm or a retained search firm? You should,
right.
Now, to know that as a candidate makes all the difference in the world, because as Shira's already said, it's a completely different experience with a contingency firm than with a retained firm.
Completely. And I will tell you that there are some firms who do both, right? It just sort of depends on the search, but there are some that are like just retained or just contingent. And typically the less responsive ones often are contingent, but it is good to ask. I did want to also mention, welcome to the stage, Jim Thomas. He's never been with us before. He's going by James here. So Jim is a longtime colleague and he's also a career coach, and he's going to drop in periodically when he can. So Jim, thanks for being with us. And, you know, as we go around, our model right now is open Q&A. So as questions come in, myself and Vern and Wendy and Rick, we are all here to help, but Jim, you are certainly welcome to add your 2 cents. And Jim also, like Vern, used to be a head of HR, VP of HR. So he's got that corporate experience as well. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. All right. So next question.
Sure, I have a question. I was lucky enough to get 3 offers in the last 10 days.
Wow.
2 with one company, and I decided on one of those. And I gracefully declined the other 2.
Yeah.
And I realized that I feel pretty confident about the role. I have a 30, 60, 90-day plan that I'm going to review with my manager to sort of position myself for success.
Yep.
And I'm pretty comfortable with external, my external network. I'm going to continue to keep that warm and, you know, working for me. It's what got me to these job offers.
Yeah.
But I don't have an internal networking strategy. And I'm wondering if you have any tips for me. Like, for example, I want to stay in contact with the people that I declined. You know, I don't want to burn that bridge. I want to find a sponsor. I want to, you know, do all these things that are more political and are wrapped around, you know, an internal network.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, do you have any tips for me while I get that together?
That's a great question. You know what, Jim, I think that you might be even a good one to answer this. I mean, I think all 4 of us could, but would you like to take a stab at this?
Sure. Put me on the spot.
So sorry. Vern, did you have something to say?
Tammy, could you just explain to me what you mean by an internal network versus an external network? I'm not.
Well, the internal network's at the new company. And so, you know, I'm pretty confident with what I'm doing outside, but now I feel like I need strategy internally as well.
Okay. Yep. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, thank you. I would first say, Tammy, it's sort of my strategy to work sort of like a circle, starting at the core, which would be your department, and working out. The farthest ring would certainly be the CEO of the organization, but let's talk about your internal strategy. Who are the movers and shakers within your department? That will be clearly known to you over time, probably in a very short period of time. But it doesn't hurt to certainly reach out to individuals and start building a sort of an internal relationship with individuals internal to your department, and determine who the individuals with influence are internal to your department. I would certainly grab hold, if you haven't already, to an organization chart and look at it in a grander scale relative to who the individuals. I'm not sure what company you're going to be working for, whether that's private or public, but I would assume that there's a CEO, there are individuals who founded the organization. If it's a private company, those individuals, getting closer to those individuals would be helpful. I think that the best way, quite frankly, to develop an internal network is for individuals to come to you. And how do individuals come to you? They're going to do that through your good work. So the more influential you could be and more public you can be regard to what you're doing and the quality of what you're doing is going to cause individuals to create curiosity around you. And I got to tell you, the more people are curiosity about newbies, those new to the organization, they're going to want to reach out and figure out who they are. And through that, you can determine how you want to build your internal network. That's a quick and dirty way of explaining perhaps how to do that. And again, it's going to change from every organization. The more detail I had about your organization, I could probably give you more information. But based on what you said, I think that might be at least an initial approach you might want to use.
And that's great advice. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, to build on what Jim is talking about, in addition to letting your good work shine, which is great, you may also want to proactively become a resource for other people, right? Let people know that you're here to help. And not only that, but get curious about the projects that they're working on. Raise your hand to see if you can help them. Maybe there's a cross-functional project. Maybe there's some sort of innovative initiative that they're working on or you want to work on, and you pull people in. Raise your hand, volunteer for things. Those are some of the ways that not only do you get noticed by your colleagues, but you get noticed by executives as well, right? So that when they see that you've raised your hand to volunteer for one of their projects, when those senior team meetings are happening every once in a while, like, wow, this woman, Tammy, she's been really, she's from this other department, right? But she's really been instructive and useful and helpful. And then, when openings come up, when there's promotion opportunities, sometimes you're the one who's picked because other departments know you because of what you've done for them.
And so let me give a little bit of twist to what James said, because again, as he said, Jim said he doesn't know the organization. It might also be position dependent. So let me give you the example. As a VP of HR, when I went into a new organization, and I'm sure Jim did the same thing, HR serves all of the functions in the organization. So my initial internal networking strategy was to meet with the heads of those departments or those functions. Tell me about your function. Tell me how it serves the organization. What are your key objectives? What are the key goals you're trying to achieve? What challenges do you have? How has HR served you in the past? What do you need from HR? So asking those questions and getting that information and then figuring out, well, can I volunteer to help this person? Or how do I best develop a relationship with this person that will be meaningful to them because I can give them something that they really need. And that's a great way to build a network. But again, like I said, it might depend on the type of position you have.
And if I could just add that, Vern, that's a very good point, because as a senior HR executive, it's easy for us to come into an organization and start having those informational meetings to figure out where you are in the organizational structure may limit that, because obviously your boss may want you to do real work versus building and getting information from your coworkers or individuals who are officers of the organization. Certainly is normal if you are more senior in the organization. So, and Tammy, excuse me, but I'm not sure what level you're going into the organization, but bear that in mind in regard to your productivity, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Great question, Tammy. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Other questions? Quiet today, you guys. You're normally a flutter. Oh, Alan.
Hi, thanks. Good morning, everyone. I had a question. I found two positions on LinkedIn, and at both of them, I knew someone that I could connect me. One was from my alumni group that knew the hiring manager. The other was a former colleague. Both of them were very generous and said, "Yeah, I'll send me the material." The person that worked at the organization put my resume forward internally. The other person, I applied for the job, and then he sent along my resume to the hiring manager. So weeks have passed. I didn't receive even a, "Hey, thanks for sending me submitting your material." Both jobs have been reposted to LinkedIn. Both of my contacts were like, "Hey, let me know how this goes.
Mhm.
Keep me informed." How do I go about telling them, "Hey, it doesn't look like it worked out, but thanks very much"?
I think it's not quite that it didn't work out. I think it's you following back with them and asking them, "Hey, did it make it? Did my resume make it to the hiring manager? Can you follow up with the hiring manager, whoever they contacted, to see what the status of your candidacy is?" You never know. Maybe you got lost in cyberspace, right? So I would definitely ask, don't assume that you didn't get contacted because you weren't qualified. Do one more follow-up and say, "Can you check on the status of the resume that you submitted?" Because I've had that happen. In fact, there was somebody on this call who you guys might have remembered a number of weeks ago. I actually did that very thing for just friendly referral so person on this call asked me, or excuse me, I had heard about an opening through an HR contact. I knew somebody on this call was qualified. I made the referral. No follow-up, no nothing. So the person on this call said, "Hey, what's going on?" So I follow up again. And the HR person's like, "Oh my gosh, I've been so busy, blah, blah, blah." And that happened like 3 times. Me following up. Finally, right? The HR is like, "Oh my God, just, make it happen." So I did, I made it happen. And the person was able to get interviewed. So you just never know, right? What's going on behind the scenes. So don't assume that, you're disqualified. Just do at least one more follow-up and say, "Hey, can you just check on the status for me?"
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Mike.
Hey, good morning. I have a two-parter, actually. First part is I applied to a position which I will be interviewing for next week. At the time of application, I was told the hiring manager was, let's just say, person A. And that person is going to be in the interviews next week. I have since found out, at least officially, that person A is not listed as the hiring manager. It's now person B, or it may have always been person B, but anyway, I was originally told person A. So the cover letter that I sent was to person A, and I'll be meeting with both of these people, not at the same time, individually. So the general question is it something that I bring up, just ignore it, or see what happens, etc. And then the second part is, I don't know where exactly we're going to be where they are in the process, but it looks like they've condensed and accelerated the interviews. And so from another general perspective, a good way to close/ask for the position from both of those individuals, like what's a good way to word, assuming everything goes well, so I'm interested in working with you, et cetera, knowing that I may have addressed the wrong person initially.
I think it's pretty simple. Because you're going to meet with the 2 people, right? Pretty soon. Yeah, just say, FYI, I was initially informed that, A, that you would be the hiring manager. I understand maybe it's B, just letting you know that's why I addressed the cover letter that way. I think that's just as simple as that. No big deal. Yeah. Super, super simple. Is there anything else about that would be helpful?
No, I guess it was just more from and again, assuming that everything goes well, I guess a good close, knowing that I don't know the status, if it switched or if I was given bad information. So is it I would like to work with you, or I would like to work with the team?
Team, yeah, it's the team. Well, absolutely, yeah. The team, the organization, yeah, you don't have to get too specific. But just say, this sounds like a terrific role. It's a great fit, and I'm aligned with the mission. Blah 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 blah. Really excited about the opportunity. you know.
Yeah.
So,
And Mike, the other thing I would say is, I mean, any of these types of questions, as a job seeker, you know, you have a right to ask the questions, you know, who's the reporting, who am I, who does this position report to? I want to make sure I'm clear on that, right? You need to know that. And the process, you know, what's the process, and when can I expect to hear? And, you know, certainly ask those questions, be proactive around that.
yeah, for sure. This is as much about you as it is about them. You
Yeah.
know, even though you're applying for the job and you seem like it feels like you are in the lesser position, right? The less the less of a position of strength. It's still, you know, it still needs to be right for you, right? So ask the questions that are important to you. Absolutely. I mean, it's a 50-50 thing or 100-100 thing, right? Everybody has to
Yeah.
come and meet in the middle, regardless of who's pursuing whom. So
Yeah.
always feel free to ask questions, but just ask it in a respectful, thoughtful way, but ask whatever you need to ask.
Thanks.
All right, Sufyan, if I'm pronouncing that.
Hi. Yeah, you did. Thank you. So I have this question. I've applied for a position at a company about like 3 weeks ago. And as I applied, instantly a recruiter contacted me like within like 20 minutes. And I wanted to schedule an interview, and instantly, not an interview, but I wanted to talk. And he instantly called me. And we started talking. He was like super excited, thought that I was like qualified and everything. And then as we were talking, and initially, so as we were talking, he asked a question about security clearance, and I have a dual citizenship. And so instantly he said, oh, okay, then you're not qualified. The application didn't require security clearance, but later they were sponsoring it. And so he kind of so dramatically lost interest in me.
Mm-hmm.
I had a couple of questions. I was like, I had really hard time holding him on the phone, which was a little bit like so unusual to dramatically lose interest. And then he agreed to answer my emails, and I sent him, because there were about 4 other positions that I thought that I qualified for. So I emailed him those 4 positions, and he like one by one looked them up and said, no, all of them require security clearance. So now I found another position at the same company that doesn't require security clearance, not only to apply, but it doesn't say anything that after apply. And my question is, would it make sense for me to apply directly, or would it make sense for me to contact that recruiter who lost his interest in me so dramatically?
I mean, I think to contact that recruiter, because remember, the recruiter it's not personal, right? It's not that he lost interest in you. It's just that you weren't qualified for those roles, right? So to me, it makes sense to follow up with him, is it him, I think, and right, and say, look, here, I found one that doesn't require, am I correct? That's what I would do. Rick, what would you say?
I would say the same thing. When you have a dual citizenship, just from a perspective and a clearance, a lot of times the clearances take a lot longer, because when they're doing their investigation, any travel to another country, I mean, there's a ton of things that sometimes make these things 6 months, 9 months. And so a business can't operate that way because they need this position in place in 2 months. So it's definitely not personal. It may be they need someone with an active clearance. I don't know why it wasn't on the position description to begin with, because that's definitely something that needs to be right out front like that. But it's not personal. It's just there's business needs and reasons why they have stuff. But the way he reacted to you, all I can say is every recruiter's different. Like Shira had mentioned, some are good, some are medium, some are great. And, so you have different personalities. You just can't take it personal.
No. At any stage of this process for anybody, it's not
Right.
personal, it's business.
And if I could add, Rick, your point's well taken. The other side of it is, what was not mentioned was the level of clearance that the recruiter might have mentioned. If this was a top secret lifestyle poly and they have to go through, and I'm using my background, I worked for Lockheed Martin for a number of years, so I've gone through the clearance process personally. And I can tell you that if there's another country involved, a physical agent may very well have to go to that country, interview individuals that know you, that, a 60 to 90 day process, which is quick, by the way, could take 6 months to a year. They really have to be detectives and find individuals in your background, some of whom are not individuals that are references that you've even given. So that they had to look at, this is a very costly process, and do we want to pay that kind of money, where there very well may be other individuals, believe it or not, who are equally as qualified as you, who they could get through the clearance process in a relatively short period of time.
Right.
So there are a lot of variables, but I would say up front, I've heard several of you talk so far this morning, and I would say that you should never make a negative assumption about anything in the recruiting process. When you say, well, I assume they don't want me, or the recruiter changed his mind about me, you are putting out negative energy. At that point in time, it becomes more difficult for you to get the position. It's not classified that you went after. There's a lot behind the looking glass. It's almost like the Wizard of Oz. There's a lot behind the looking glass that most candidates never know in regard to what's going on. And so you never should assume that negative things are going on as it relates to you. And that's going to be very helpful in you getting what you want, whatever that is.
Can I have a clarifying question? So should I submit my application and then contact the recruiter, or should I contact the recruiter without submitting an application? That's what my question.
Well, my response would be, it depends on the relationship you have with the recruiter. If the recruiter was someone who you felt that it was easy to contact them before by phone, and they contacted you, as I said, rather aggressively up front, it may save you time, quite frankly, to just get either a voicemail into the recruiter or call the recruiter. But I would put a caveat around this. You should not do out of desperation, okay? Because you don't want to come across as desperate. Boy, I really want to work for this place. And now you put yourself in a position where the recruiter says, well, this person's so anxious, that could come across as a turnoff. And I would also say that, well, I think that if you have a good relationship and you feel comfortable calling, that's fine. But sometimes when you put things in writing and you have an opportunity to review it several times before you press enter and send it, you have an opportunity to really think about what you want to say versus getting on the phone, and whatever the recruiter might say might cause you to now feel, oh my goodness, maybe I should have never called. So think about what approach you feel more would suit you best. And I think that's the approach you use, whether you call or send an email.
Oh, thank you. I didn't even think about appearing desperate. Yeah, as I checked 5 positions, and this is the 6th position I'm applying for. Yeah.
As long as you're qualified, it's a business relationship, right? You are there to solve their business needs. That's it. So feel free to apply if you feel like you're a good fit.
Okay.
Good, thank you. That's question series. Anyone else?
Good morning. So I'll go. I don't know if it's normal, if it's abnormal, but I had applied for a few positions with Amazon here in Arlington and some of the other areas, and I kept getting the under consideration, and then they would drop it and I wouldn't hear anything. And I had reached out to a few people through LinkedIn and made some good connections. And I actually had a gentleman who's a senior operations manager refer me for a position, and I got the under consideration. And as we looked this morning, I'm still under consideration. But last week, there was one that was advertised that was they had the caption on it for military veterans encouraged to apply. And so I did. And then I followed it up with an email just saying, hey, I just wanted to thank you. And I applied for this position. And the senior military recruiter person there on LinkedIn immediately responded back and said, oh, I'll definitely have somebody get in touch with you here right away. And I was like, wow, okay, this is the first time I've progressed to actually a person who's going to contact me. And sure enough, within an hour, I had an email from a recruiter saying, I'd like to set up a time to talk to you. Pick 3 times off the drop down. So I did that. And I picked 5. I gave them like every day, fine, whenever I'm available. And I got nothing the next day. But then yesterday I got an email and it was from a different individual, not the recruiter. And he just said, hey, I've chosen your date and time on Tuesday, and be prepared for your interview. Make sure you review the 14 leadership principles of Amazon, and we're ready to move forward. So is that normal? And do I lose anything by never having that initial contact with the recruiter to brief me up, train me up, prepare me for the interview, or?
So I'll answer this in 2 ways. Look, every company is different in terms of how they do their process. So, I mean, it would be great to have the recruiter prep you for it. Sometimes I think that Amazon does that. But maybe they're just trying to move quickly, in this case. But I will say, since you brought up Amazon, we don't actually get people really talking about Amazon much here. So Amazon's 14 leadership principles are nothing to be trifled with. Okay. They're very serious. Amazon is a very, very challenging place to work. I'm going to say that publicly. I know this is being recorded. They are a very aggressive company. They make no bones about that. They're, as we all know, right? They're just taking over everything. And the way that they do that is they rely on these 14 leadership principles, which really come down to 2 words. And I cannot emphasize this to you enough. Challenge everything.
Right.
You cannot have your own, if you have an opinion, it's going to be swatted down. And then their opinions are going to be swatted down. And everybody needs to be challenging. It is, you have to have an incredibly thick skin to work there. So just so you know, if you're even going to continue to pursue this, it's not for everything. It's not for the faint of heart. I couldn't work there. Most people I know couldn't work there. It's a very, very unusual kind of an environment. And so that's just not for nothing, like I just wanted to mention that to you. But,
Right.
I think that they're moving fast, and if you can get the recruiter to prep you, call them back, write them back and say, look, do you have any, I'm going to be meeting with so-and-so on Tuesday or whatever. Do you have any prep tips for me? That's fine. You can do that.
Well, I took a roundabout, and I've got some connections from another group that I'm in. And so I actually talked to some people from Amazon, and they've sent me some prep materials. And yeah, they've already briefed me up with the those who do not love Amazon find something else fairly quickly at Amazon.
Yeah.
So
Scott, just so you know, the person that you'll be meeting or talking with is likely to be the hiring manager. So one of the 3 offers I got was with Amazon Web Services.
okay.
And you'll have an Amazon recruiting person, and then you'll have an Amazon coordinator. And the coordinator is basically there to schedule your loop. So assuming that you get through the next interview, and that'll likely be with the hiring manager, you'll go through a loop of between 5 and 7 people. They'll try to schedule all of those all on one day. And what your recruiter will do is have a half an hour phone call with you after you meet with the hiring manager, and assuming that goes well, to kind of help you prepare for the loop.
Okay.
And so there's a ton of stuff on YouTube about Amazon interviews and questions and all that stuff. So a lot of that stuff is really readily available. And
Right.
the only other thing that I would tell you about, doing your star stories is that make them bestsellers in a sense of, if you're going to tell a story, have a title, have an ending. I always call them start stories because most people don't put the final T, which is the takeaway, and the takeaway is kind of like in a story. and they all lived happily ever after. Or that's why I'm a great fit for this job. Or, you know, this is
Okay.
this is what makes Amazon a great employer for me. But that takeaway piece is what they're looking for. And so if I have a prep guide as well that I can send to you if you give me your email for it. But like Shira says, it's no joke. That is kind of the Cadillac of interviews. And if you can get through an Amazon interview, honestly, I think you could, if you wanted to work there,
Right.
you could probably, you know, ace any other interview.
Right.
Right. That's what I've heard. And I've heard it's going to be intensive to say the least.
Yes.
So, yep, it'll be fun.
And there's also the added thing of the bar raiser. If you don't know what that is, that's a person.
I do.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
I've attended a couple of the live online through YouTube hiring seminars that there's a couple of different women that do those. And one of them, she was a bar raiser. So she's gone into that in her briefings. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
The decision will be really quick. You know, their SLA is 5 days. They told me I got the job in 2.5. And so,
wow.
Yeah, it's very quick, and they are very committed to that SLA.
Okay, that's good to know.
If I could just interject, and Scott, I think you'll probably do well because of the great insights that Tammy has given you. And I've been taking notes on what Tammy has said, as well as thinking about history. And one of the things that I have found with candidates for positions, doesn't matter the position, is that they typically are not necessarily great students of history. Because as I was listening to Shira and Tammy talk about Amazon, I thought about, for those of you who might remember, AOL, MCI, the whole telecom arena, software early on, Capital One, I'll throw them on the table too. Very aggressive in regard to focusing on individuals who have high energy, high passion, and high interest in the company. They don't necessarily use the word loyal, but it's almost like everyone's drinking from the same, teacup or lemonade or whatever elixir they're using. And I think that's fine, but it requires a consistent level of high energy and high focus.
Yep.
Certainly through the interview process. And so as someone who is, and I don't like using this word, unemployed, you have to put yourself in a position where you are in transition and not unemployable. They're looking for individuals who really can hit the floor running, and it's not about your past of being out of work for some period of time, ho-hum. It's about what can you do day one at Amazon. And they're looking for individuals who can hit the floor running, who bring the passion and are highly interested in Amazon. So I'll just throw that out, because there are a lot of companies that have come around just like Amazon relative to very structured in their process, very quick turnaround. AOL was that way, MCI was that way. I worked for LCI, they were that way. But I think that the fact that they are showing some interest in you at a pretty high level, you already have, I think, 1 foot through the door, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I would add to this whole discussion is, as Shira pointed out in the beginning, this is an example of the culture of the organization. And again, as a job seeker, and going back to the earlier conversation, it's really important that you ask questions of the potential employer. Is this the right fit for you? You want to learn as much as you can about who's going to be my boss and what's the organization and what's the culture, and make the best decision for you. And it's okay sometimes to turn down a job offer, as hard as that can be sometimes. That's actually the right decision for you in terms of your career. Because if you get into the wrong culture and in the wrong place, you won't last very long.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so with that, we're going to need to wrap up. This is our kind of end time. And for those of you who are new, so for the last, I don't know, month or two, I've been leading a prayer session at the end of this call. So for those who would like to stay on, you're certainly welcome to. So we're going to go ahead and conclude the formal part of our meeting today. But for those of you who don't want to stay on for the prayer call, we'll look forward to seeing you next week. All right, so have a blessed day, everyone.
Thanks, Shara. Bye-bye.
Bye.